My name is Erica Uszak, and I am a Civil War Institute Student Fellow, and I am standing in front of the Sherfy barn with the Sherfy house just behind me, and I'm here to talk about the 114th Pennsylvania Infantry. One of the things that's really unique about the 114th Pennsylvania was that they were a Zouaves regiment, so they modeled their uniforms after the French Zouaves. Those Zouaves are part of the French army. They were formed in northern Africa in 1830, and over time leading up to the Civil War, those French Zouaves had gained this reputation as being one of the best fighting units, as one of the elite soldiers, especially going into the Crimean War. So they gained this international reputation as being one of the elite forces. So by the time of the American Civil War, regiments in both North and South sometimes patterned their uniforms after those French Zouaves, because they also want to be associated with being one of the best of the best. So this particular regiment, the 114th Pennsylvania, is raised by Colonel Charles Collis in Philadelphia, and one of the things that they do to attract men to this regiment is they parade the new recruits through the streets of Philadelphia to try to attract young men to join their regiment, persuaded to join this regiment based on their reputation and the flashy uniform. Usually Zouaves have a fez cap and trademark red baggy pants. That's one of the trademarks of their uniform. So right here, like I said, we're standing in front of the Sherfy house where the 114th Pennsylvania will be fighting here on July 2nd. The 114th Pennsylvania gets here late evening of July 1st, and as they're coming into Gettysburg, they see civilians who are leaving Gettysburg with their things, and some of the civilians cheer them on. Some of them are kind of pessimistic, so again they have a mixed reaction to these civilians who are leaving Gettysburg, evacuating, and these soldiers are coming in ready for the battle here. So on July 2nd, the 114th Pennsylvania will be defending this ground. Late in the evening, they're going to struggle against Confederate General William Barksdale and his brigade of Mississippians, who are going to be coming behind us here. And so the 114th Pennsylvania, along with the rest of Graham's brigade, are going to try to hold on to this spot until late evening, when the Union line here starts to fall apart around 6 o'clock. Then they're going to turn and retreat from the Sherfy farm, and they're going to take shots at the enemy as they're withdrawing. As they retreat, they're going to lose touch with the rest of the brigade and not going to be able to reunite with them until later on July 3rd, that morning. The 114th Pennsylvania will use this barn as a makeshift hospital, but during the battle, it's going to catch fire, probably from an artillery shell, and according to one newspaper account later, about 20 Pennsylvania Zouaves are going to perish in the flames, unable to escape as the barn catches fire. One 20th Maine soldier comes by the awful scene on July 5th, and he writes, quote, "The barn was full of dead and wounded, which had been set on fire and burned. And there were skeletons of men, some all burned up, others half burned, some with only their clothes burned off." He goes on to say that even outside of the barn, quote, "as many as 30 or 40 of the Pennsylvania Zouaves' red breeches laid outside unburied." And he goes on to say, quote, "every man was swollen as large as 2 men and purple and black." He shuddered at the scene, and he swore they hoped to never see something like it again. So again, you can kind of imagine the horrific aftermath of what takes place here, as well as what the Sherfy family will encounter when they come back to this scene. The captain of the 114th Pennsylvania says that after the fighting here on July 2nd, they spend most of the time in the woods, not specifying quite where they were, until about 3 o'clock on July 3rd. They moved to support Cowan's battery, the 1st New York battery, at 3 o'clock near the infamous copse of trees on Cemetery Ridge. So they're again in the thick of battle. Probably not as intense as the fighting here, but it's still in a dangerous situation. Then they fall back to the woods again, and then they help stack arms and help bury the dead after that. So the 114th Pennsylvania entered the Battle of Gettysburg with 312 men. Officially, in the report, they listed 9 men killed, 86 wounded, and 60 missing. But many of those missing are the ones that they could not identify who were killed in the barn fire. So now we're standing in front of the monument for the 114th Pennsylvania, and so the inscription on the monument says that it was dedicated, quote, in the memory of the heroic men of that command who here laid down their lives in defense of their country's flag. So again, they're dedicating it to the men who died here, who fought here. The base of the monument is going to be finished first and is dedicated in 1886. The statue of the soldier was added 2 years later in 1888, and if you notice, he has a very militant pose. He is in the middle of putting his ramrod down the barrel of his rifle. His face is stern, his eyes are ahead, perhaps on the enemy, so he's ready for action. He's preparing to fire, and again plays into that role of showing off that they are courageous Zouaves, they are brave. And the design of the pants and the jacket on the bronze figure shows that he is clearly a Zouave. When they came back to dedicate this monument, the person who gave the speech, the veteran A.W. Given, said that, quote, the artist has given him an expression of determination. He is fighting freedom's battle. The enemy must be driven back. So again, when they come back to commemorate this monument, to dedicate it, they recognize the monumental importance of not only reaffirming the Union cause of reunification, but also for emancipation, for freedom. There is also worth noting that there is a monument to the commander of the 114th Pennsylvania, Colonel Collis, who is in the National Cemetery. He is actually buried there, so there's a monument to mark where he is as well. So when they come to dedicate this monument on November 11th, 1888, the speaker, A.W. Given, emphasizes that this is hallowed ground that they stand on, made sacred by the deaths of their comrades. He recalls in a little bit graphic detail how, quote, it was a sad and sorrowful task to lay beneath the ground he who had only a little while before been your companion and tent mate, now mangled and torn, you not even able to recognize him as they're burying the dead. He recalls that even worse was the sight of the barn, where he reminded his fellow comrades that, quote, of the, quote, charred remains of many of your companions, and that unfortunately a lot of these men had to be buried in the National Cemetery as unknowns. And this defies the Victorian idea of the good death, where men were supposed to die with their family, their friends around them, were supposed to receive a proper Christian burial, have an identified grave, and sadly this cannot be achieved for many members of the 114th Pennsylvania. He concludes his speech by saying, quote, let the associations formed upon the battlefield not be severed until the great reaper death shall put forth his sickle and we then be gathered home. So he's again emphasizing that the bond that they have between these soldiers, between these veterans, is strong until death, and the veterans recognize the need in coming here to dedicate this monument to record their experiences and memorialize the dead. He follows it up by reminding his fellow veterans not to forget, quote, the graves of our brave comrades who sleep the last sleep and who have fought their last battle. He reminds them, quote, when opportunity offers, remember your living comrades and the widows and orphans of those who have gone. So he's reminding them that they still have a duty to pay their respects to their dead, and as well connect with each other and make sure that society doesn't forget what they did here. Because above all else, the veterans fear that they fear above all else that theirs and their dead comrades' sacrifices could be forgotten, especially by 1888, where civilian society is ready to move on for the war, and more civilians are starting to pass away. But these veterans, in their grief, stand on this hallowed ground and they know better that they shall never forget what happened here, and by raising this monument, they're instructing future generations to never forget what the 114th Pennsylvania did here.